Let me take you back to 2019. The Bank of International Settlements and the European Central Bank, institutions that don't just move markets, they are the market, released their joint report with the Bank of Japan. They called it Project Stella. The public story? Oh, it was clean, professional, safe. Testing distributed ledger technology for cross-border settlement. Sounds innocent enough, right? Academic, exploratory, the kind of things regulators do when they're staying current with innovation. But let me tell you about the private reality, the one that those in banking could read between every carefully chosen line. Stella's language read like it was lifted straight from Ripple's playbook. Now I know what you're thinking. Come on, blockchain terminology overlaps all the time. Bitcoin, Ethereum, they all sound similar. Wrong. Listen to what the official report said. DLT arrangements can support atomic settlement and deterministic finality in cross-border payments. Let me bring that back slowly. Atomic settlement, deterministic finality. That's not generic blockchain jargon. That's not crypto bro Twitter speak. That's not some consultant buzzword salad. That's XRPL's native vocabulary. Those phrases, those exact architectural principles, they don't come from Bitcoin's proof of work mining. They don't come from Ethereum's smart contract gas fees. They come from one place, the XRPL ledger. Time. Most of the market brushed it off. Retail traders were too busy chasing the next meme coin bump. Crypto Twitter was still fighting over which ICO would change everything. But the people in banking, they knew better. They'd been in the rooms. They'd seen the presentations. They watched Ripple run the same playbook at closed-door workshops since 2016. And now, 3 years later, the ECB and the BIS, they're putting the same language in their own reports. Not as a citation, not as an acknowledgement, but as if they discovered it themselves. But here's where it gets interesting. Behind the scenes, far away from press releases and public-facing narratives, NDAs were circulating among European banks. These agreements were reviewed in 2019. One clause stood out like a neon sign in a dark room. Liquidity corridors shall be tested against distributed settlement infrastructures under regulator sandbox conditions. Now, if you don't speak banker, like I don't, and most don't, it's translated as such. It's not Ethereum. That isn't Bitcoin. That is XRP ledger architecture disguised in regulatory tone. They were testing Ripple's rails without ever saying Ripple's name. And if you've been in this space for a while, they'll call it everything but by its name. So this wasn't academic curiosity, people. The European Central Bank and the Bank of Japan, they weren't dabbling in blockchain like some university research lab. They weren't playing around with experimental tech for white paper. They were stress testing the very principles Ripple had been advancing without naming Ripple. Why? Because regulators never reveal which vendor they're modeling. That's not how institutional power operates. You don't show your hand. You don't give attribution. You don't tip off the market, but the fingerprints are there. If you know what to look for, you can see them everywhere. While crypto Twitter was fighting over which ICO would move, the Bank of International Settlements and the European Central Bank were quietly embedding Ripple's vocabulary into central bank experiments. The NDAs made it crystal clear. Protocol agnostic liquidity corridors shall be aligned with ISO 222 and real-time gross settlement protocols. Protocol agnostic. That's the tell. That's the sleight of hand. Because when you say protocol agnostic, but then describe exactly what Ripple does, atomic settlement, deterministic finality, ISO 222 compatible, real-time gross settlement, you're not being agnostic. You're speaking in code. That's XRPL in banker's language. So what's the big picture here? Let me lay it out for you. Project Stella was sold as a research report. In reality, it was a blueprint for cross-border rails Ripple had already been piloting. By 2019, the European Central Bank and the Bank of International Settlements and the Bank of Japan were openly speaking Ripple's language without attribution. They took Ripple's architecture. They adopted Ripple's terminology. They tested Ripple's principles, and they called it research. Now here's the vision, and I'm going to look through my Afrofuturistic lens. I'm going to apply it to this moment. This isn't just about financial technology. This is about who gets to build the future's infrastructure. For decades, global financial systems have been built by the same old gatekeepers, using the same old rails, serving the same old power structures. Settlement took days. Fees drained billions from the global south. Liquidity was weaponized as control. But what Ripple understood, what they built from the ground up, was a liberation technology. A system where value moves at the speed of information, where settlement is instant, not delayed, where liquidity bridges continents in seconds, not weeks, where the language itself, atomic settlement, deterministic finality, speaks to freedom from intermediary extraction. And now, the very institutions that once gatekept these systems are adopting that language. Not because they're generous, not because they suddenly care about financial inclusion. You can't be joking that hard. But because the future already arrived and they can't afford to be left behind. History won't remember Stella as a footnote. Mark my words. It will be remembered as the moment Ripple's architecture entered the vocabulary of central banks. Deterministic finality, atomic settlement, liquidity corridors. Those aren't buzzwords. They aren't marketing copy. They are the foundation of XRPL. And in 2019, by then, the European Central Bank and the Bank of International Settlements, they weren't just studying DLT. They were rehearsing Ripple. So the next time someone tells you crypto is just speculation, just hype, just digital gambling for tech bros, remember Project Stella. Remember that the most powerful financial institution in the world don't waste time on toys. They don't write joint reports with the Bank of Japan about things that don't matter. They were preparing. They were testing. They were learning the language, Ripple's language. And now they're speaking it fluently. The revolution wasn't televised. It was published in the central bank research report. And most of us even noticed. But now you know. 9,000.